If people are dieting now more than ever before, then why are nearly 1 in 3 American adults overweight? Dr. Gundry, who's helped thousands lose weight and feel younger and healthier than ever, says most people are not getting enough fat-burning MCTs from their food. MCTs are a special kind of compound that instead of turning into fat when you consume it, turns into ketones, which is a chemical that breaks down the excess fat in your body. So, by getting more MCTs in your diet, you essentially flip a switch that puts your body in caloric bypass mode, which can flush out excess fat and calories. And he's created an easy way for you to activate caloric bypass right at home. It's called MCT Wellness. This powerful blend of fat-flushing MCT powders and antioxidant-rich polyphenols is designed to help you unlock your body's fat-burning, energy-producing potential. What's even better is that it's a delicious drink. I love how incredible it tastes. All you do is add a scoop to water, enjoy, and watch as you start feeling slimmer and more energized. So, if you want to experience a quick, easy, and effective way to melt pounds fast, go to GundryMD.com/energy and order right now to get up to 53% off your regular price order with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Again, that's GUNDRYMD.com/energy.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. Home delivery available in Regina at sassbeerdelivery.ca. Welcome to the Three Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only We're Sending Our Thoughts to John podcast. I'm Joel Gasson with John Fraser as usual, and we have a few things to get to today. No real super, pressing issues, but the CFL is in the news again for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure you're all fairly aware of at this point, so I'm not going to go over them in it too deep right now because, well, we might not have much to talk about after, quite frankly. Right. But before we get to all that, it's been a tough week and a bit for our boy John Fraser here, as
really has been.
As I'm sure you know the news by now that one Sergio Castillo has left the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for the Edmonton Elks. So the good news is that Sergio's still around.
Yes, he's still in the CFL,
which is always better than not in the CFL or the NFL.
Right.
But at the same time, John finally, was able to reach for the pinnacle. You saw his boy be the unofficial Grey Cup MVP, and then, like all good things, it came to an end.
It did. It did. You see, it's funny because through Colin Hodgson, who, of course, the 8N Nation episode, I've gotten to know Sean White a little bit, and so it's like I'm just used to having a kicker I really like be in Edmonton, and I was pretty distraught. I was shaken up, but I actually had the chance to text with Sergio, which softened the blow. Because, he did want to go back to Winnipeg, but, I'm like, hey, man, you got to look out for number one. I totally understand it. I get it. And I was basically in a full depression, moping around everywhere, drinking my face off more than usual until this ray of light happened about a week ago. I think it was last Thursday. I get this call from reception at work saying, John, there's some guy here for you. And first I go, I ain't expecting anybody, which usually that's one thing when you get the unexpected person looking for you at the job I do, it's rarely ever good.
No.
It's like, this is bad. My car has blown up. The bank took an extra payment. Brah! And instead, there's a handsome guy in coveralls standing there with a nondescript looking bag. And I walk up and he's like, sorry for your loss. And at first I was confused because my walls were up. But I like, Dave, if you're listening, and I know you are, I apologize that I was so confused at first because I'm like, my walls are up. Okay, which customer is this? Who is this? Okay, what's going on? And then I see this label on this bag that is basically the design of our Sergio shirts with the long S's that says, sorry. And I'm like, I put two and two together. It is Dave bringing me a care package of pierogies, and I can tell you, A, they are so good. And B, as soon as I realized what was going on, my day turned around, my depression lifted, as the way to my heart is always with food or booze. So thank you, Dave, for making this man feel better about his boy leaving. And I am, tonight, wiping my tears while wearing my number 14 Blue Bomber jersey.
And I mean, at the end of the day, as the saying goes, and I believe I tweeted this at you at the night when we learned Sergio was going to Edmonton, when he, of course, announced it himself. It is better to have loved than lost than never to have loved at all, right?
You know what? It's better that he didn't end up signing with the Tiger Cats and become the MVP in that Grey Cup. Instead, it was like,
better yet, not win the Grey Cup, right?
Exactly. So, my longtime favorite kicker re-signing with the team where I started my bro crush on him. It all came together for a championship. So I am a big believer of the old Bill Simmons back, in his early days. He used to say that you've got a grace period after your team wins a championship. That you can't be really upset. And the Bill Simmons take was that's 5 years. I think of the CFL because it's a small league, it's 3 years. So for the next 3 years.
But does it like, build on top of each other for back to back?
I think so. I would say so, yes. So I would I will come out on the record and say that the Bombers can go over and get rid of all my favorite players in the next 5 years, and I'll just go, yeah, well, we won and we had Sergio.
At the very least, yeah, Sergio being in that game and the rightful MVP.
Oh, should have been the MVP.
That was like bonus points on the back to back and the grace period afterwards, really.
Oh, 100%. And the thing is that I love with that was was the number of people that were texting me like, I can't believe Sergio was so awesome at the game. I'm like, I told you all. He saved us once. He was brought here to save us again. So so I was right. Y'all were wrong. I can sing the I was right song, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall, especially when the crew at our website at 3 Down Nation put out the salary cap piece. And Sergio still hadn't signed, and Winnipeg is basically already over the cap.
Yeah. And
a player of Sergio's caliber is not $60,000, right? He signed for reported, I believe it was $125, and he deserves every single dime of that. He is consistently proven to be an all-star kicker in the CFL, and just a great personality. And that's why I'm also glad, as I mentioned, that I was texting with Sergio. No, I did not steal his phone number. I did not. That is not something I did. I'm a bit of a stalker. I'm not that much of a stalker. But we reached out to him shortly after the Grey Cup. It was the curling trials weekend when Winnipeg media was going nuts over my Sergio jersey. And he reached out and we said, let's get you on the podcast sometime. And, he went back home and he's been busy down there in Texas. And we've been busy here in Canada. And so we finally got confirmation that we are going to have Sergio on the podcast, and this is no longer a TBD thing.
No, because I remember we initially kind of had sort of a date set up a while ago that we talked about on social media, but not on this podcast, and then life kind of got in the way and we kind of stopped. But yeah, no, it's happening for real this time. It is going to drop after this episode sometime, a few days later probably.
Yeah. So the recording is happening actually same night that we are recording. So if some massive global event like thermonuclear war breaks out and we're not discussing it with Sergio,
which I mean at this point I wouldn't rule out anything really.
The reason I'm saying it is I'm hoping for the reverse Fraser curse here.
Yeah.
Like, if I say, oh, the world's going to end before we put out the Sergio pod, really hoping that the Fraser curse could turn this whole situation in Europe around real quick. It's powerful. I mean,
it is. We know it is, yeah.
If things de-escalate, like, tomorrow, I might go and, I might start using my powers for good. Like, I'm going to honestly start believing that, I have the power to curse things. So, let's try another one. GameStop won't continue rising. Is that one there too? Yeah.
It's there now. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's see what the price action does after we record this.
Yeah. CFL is hoping that they can continue rising with an interest in their league as conversations yet again about sort of the future of this league and where it should go and what it should do and what are the magic silver bullets out there that can apparently save this league is, of course, all over the news again, as that's seems to be the league's go-to to keep itself relevant during the month of March, especially, as things kind of crawl to a halt. But, so we're going to get into all that as usual, as, it's cheap, easy content, and that's what we're here for, really.
True, and it is one of the few things that I think actually makes me mad these days, so you'll see some guaranteed probably Fraser rants in and around this episode.
Yeah, but as usual, before we get to all of that, for the Pile of Bones Brewing Company this week, John, what is in the glass?
In the glass this week, and I have to thank my favorite bartender, Mark, at the Nutana Curling Club, all-around great guy. We were talking about beers we liked a few weeks ago, and he's from Warman. He goes, there's this place called Homebound. They don't have a ton of products on the shelf. I haven't really seen it in my travels. But
we do have it at Sobeys Vickscar. We have a little bit of it left.
See, and I looked at Sobeys Stonebridge after Mark mentioned it. It wasn't there. But Mark was kind enough to gift me a 4-pack of the Pineapple Pale Ale. It's great. It really is. Like,
yeah.
You think something like that, you're like, okay, this is just going to be like... I always find it's dangerous with fruity beers, especially from... guys that aren't quite as well known. Like now I know Pile of Bones and Rebellion and those guys, they all know how to play with fruits. But Pineapple Pale Ale is really nice. It's one of those fruity beers that'll knock you on your ass. It's 7%, but nice little hint of pineapple with a little pale ale in there. And it's actually, I was mistaken. I thought it was an IPA, and then talking to Mark, it's just a pale ale. So if you want to get into a fruity beer that doesn't punch you in the face with hops, if that's not your thing, I highly recommend the Homebound Pineapple Pale Ale. It's also fun to say. And the label kicks ass. There's a deer on there with a couple guys and beards, and one of them's got a raccoon skin cap. Looks awesome. So thank you, Mark. And everybody's being so nuts. You know what? I think Sergio leaving just has put everybody in a mood nice to me. I love it, Joel.
It's going to end at some point, but yeah.
Probably already.
Yeah, no, Homebound, good stuff. I had some of the Dr. Beeks IPA when it came down this way. They dropped off a small shipment at the store, and pretty good stuff. I've heard nothing but good things about them. That's all I've been able to try so far, as, pretty hard to get outside of Warman, and don't really spend a whole lot of time there. For me, I have the official beer of the podcast. We probably don't need to say much more about it at this point. It is, of course, the Pile of Bones White IPA. Light, citrusy, little hoppy, just perfectly crushable as the weather is turning, so the beers are slowly starting to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. We're into light beers. We are into, not light beer season, but lightener beer season.
Yeah, like the Imperial Stouts kind of go away, and other things start to kind of intrigue my palate a little more than that.
It's true. I had a Guinness on St. Paddy's Day and reminded myself that I really don't like stouts.
I mean, Guinness is not a... Unless you're having it right in Ireland, fresh from the brewery, I wouldn't really recommend it anyway. So. Yeah,
and this one had been sitting in my fridge since before the Grey Cup.
Yeah, and it was probably old to begin with. So.
It was no bueno. It was no bueno.
For many people, no bueno is maybe, of course, what is being discussed right now when it comes to where the CFL should go, as yet again, we are having another conversation about whether the CFL should, for the most part, I think most of the conversation has rendered around whether the league should go to 4 downs.
Yes.
And I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit in my mind over the years. And yeah, I think I'm firmly on team 3 down at this point, just because I think ultimately Like, I think there are benefits to 4-down football. There's no question about it. But for 4-down football to work in Canada would require too many other changes.
Yeah.
That it just wouldn't be worth it. You'd rendering, sort of the uniqueness of the Canadian game, you would neuter it completely. And there would be essentially, you would just be a light version of American football again, which again is not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I don't really think there's much point in being the same thing because as we've seen, from a lot of other leagues, being the same thing doesn't necessarily work. Because ultimately, I think 4 downs on a Canadian-sized field, more so the width and the length, but also, and the yard off the ball and the whole thing, it would just lead to offenses being even blander and more boring that we've already watched and probably even more boring than like sort of the peak of the 3 yards in a cloud of dust NFL.
Well, and you said it exactly right. Between the width of the field, between the yard off the ball, like, the good running backs in Canada, it seems like it's always it's almost like such a gamble to run, but you have these stud running backs that can rip off 4, 5, 6 yards at all times, right? And I just can only imagine you take offensive coaches, give them 4 downs in Canada. I guarantee you're seeing at least 2 runs out of those 4 downs, especially with the yard off the ball, the width. You're so close to breaking one with a talented running back. So, does all of that stay? All of that stuff that makes it so unique? No. And it was Justin Dunk that said it. And to quote our fearless leader, if you go to 4 downs, you're just the 3rd best 4-down league in North America. Obviously, the NFL and the NCAA in terms of getting eyeballs and entertainment value, right? So I am staunchly against it. I see some of the appeal of it. You can make yourself a bit more of a feeder league to the NFL, to whatever else. But, I mean, aren't we already doing that? Our top talent is more often than not given an opportunity to get NFL looks, how genuine some of them are. I mean, you look at, the Cam Wakes, even way back in the day, Jeff Garcia, Doug Flutie, like, I'm trying to think of some more recent guys. Well, even Duke Williams had a couple.
We don't talk about Jeff Garcia on this podcast anymore.
No, you are right. He is a piece of shit. You do not come after my biggest celebrity crush.
No.
Not just for her looks, but for her football knowledge.
Absolutely.
You don't. Jeff Garcia is dead. Nobody goes after my girl Mina. Anyways, as an aside, that's the world has now learned who my biggest celebrity crush is for more than one reason. I could watch her talk football all day. So knowledgeable, so insightful. Anyways, sorry, Joel, my mind has gone off.
It's my fault. I brought us there. So
you did. You knew exactly where my mind would go. But everybody except who shall not be named. Duke Williams has been down there lately. Brennan Zylstra, like Alex Singleton. Like, we are producing top end players for the NFL. Guys are getting a look. So what's this whole thing on being a developmental league, right? NFL teams going to 4 downs with the hope of getting, some college wideout that hasn't seen enough time on the field sent down to you. It's not going to happen. Like, it's just, any of these delusions aren't going to happen. NFL personnel men aren't going to send anybody that they could think even potentially play because of a fear of injuries, right? So I think going to 4 downs just to maybe get another player or two to the NFL a year, or maybe get another player or two back is just, it's stupid. It's dumb. It's one of the things that makes us uniquely Canadian, and it should never go away.
Yeah. And the other side of it, like, there's been some surveys, and there seems to be allegedly a significant amount of interest amongst those who don't watch the CFL and saying, if it was 4 downs, I'd watch. And the only thing I say to that is I call bullshit on that, essentially.
Well, exactly.
I've known some people, friends and friends and those kinds of people who would say they watch the CFL if it's 4 downs, but
but
to me,
to
me, it kind of feels like the anti-vaxxers. The goalposts will always be moving.
Right.
So if the CFL went to 4 downs, hypothetically speaking, maybe a few more of them start watching, but ultimately I don't think enough do, because you are going to lose fans over it, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But, if any move, any sort of major move may or may not affect sort of the hardcore fan base it is right now, but you have to weigh that as, well, is the net gain worth it? And that's sort of the question, and I don't think ultimately the 4 down net gain would be worth it in the long term, because I don't believe most people who say they'd start watching the CFL if it was 4 downs, quite frankly.
No, certainly. I mean, just look at TV numbers for U.S. college football here in Canada.
No, like realistically, I don't think there are as many football fans in Canada, as people will say there are. I don't even know if there are a lot of NFL fans in Canada, as people would say, because I think sort of the ratings suggest that the majority of people who watch the NFL and football in Canada, in larger numbers than normal, do so on Sunday afternoon. So to me, if they're only watching, whatever the slate of games is on CTV on Sunday afternoon, because the Monday night ratings aren't, through the roof. The Sunday night ratings aren't through the roof. The Thursday night ratings certainly aren't through the roof. No. So really, it's a Sunday afternoon, which says to me, okay, these people aren't necessarily watching because they love football. They're watching because they're having a lot of fun with fantasy and gambling. And so, you brought it up. So the idea is, okay, are these people actually football fans, or is this, is this something that they've been drawn into for a variety of different reasons?
Well, and you brought it up, and I think we move into that topic where what the CFL has been doing to grab fans. And everybody says gambling is this big cure-all, right?
It's not, but anyway.
No, it's not. I am a sports gambler. I enjoy gambling on sports. But the reason I enjoy gambling on sports is because I think I can win money gambling on sports because I think I'm pretty knowledgeable.
There are people out there, some people out there who have, said, and they've, that's kind of been the discussion since gambling, became legalized in Canada. At least single game bet gambling has been others that people will gamble on anything. Well, no. People will want to,
right.
There are people who will gamble on anything. They should probably seek help, and then, that's sort of the,
fair.
A part of the discussion around how much should we be promoting gambling as well, but that's another discussion for another day. Because at the same time, and then ultimately, I think most people who end up gambling do so on sports that they know and enjoy, and it gives them, sort of a little extra incentive to watch, or they actually, because you said, for us, we would say, okay, we may gamble on football and curling because we know the sport. I'm not going to suddenly go gamble on tennis. I don't know anything about it.
Well, that's exactly it. And the one that drives me nuts, and to me it's frustrating, Joel, how glaringly obvious the solution is, and everybody seems to put up roadblocks on it, is fantasy football. Could you tie it in with gambling? Yeah, you probably could. But at its face value, if you sign up for ESPN fantasy football for the NFL, you don't have to pay anything. If your buddy runs a league, like I run a league, and everybody pays $50, and we go in and we play, and I buy myself a new driver because I kicked everybody's asses this year. But even for me, I find, and this is my own experience, like I wasn't a huge football guy, and then I got into fantasy because it was like free. Buddy ran a league; it was $10 or whatever. We were in high school. Who cares? And that got me into watching more games. Watching more games got me more into football. Watching more football got me buying tickets and merch and the whole kind of thing, right? So it annoys me that nobody, and don't bullshit me in that salary cap TSN game. That's boring as hell. Like, that is boring as hell. I am surrounded by people that play all sorts of fantasy everything. And like I got one buddy in Northern Ontario who's texting me about, fantasy NBA and fantasy March Madness, and his games are a little rich for my blood, and same thing. I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to spend my money and do it. But it aggravates me that you get mouthpieces for the CFL when you suggest this on Twitter. The most obvious, the most obvious solution to bring in a pretty healthy set of new fans. Like, you can't tell me that with the existing partnerships between TSN and ESPN with their fantasy hockey, that you can't somehow find a way to do a successful, real, full-season CFL fantasy. Well, it costs too much money. Well, shit! Your ROI on that would be through the roof, and it annoys me. Like, I look at my own personal experience. My brother-in-law's in my fantasy league this year. He barely watched NFL football. Guess what? He pays for DAZN every year now has a favorite team. I think he bought a jersey, right? It's one of those things that just it's there, it's established, it's proven. You got a fantasy sports network, you got fantasy specialists, you have people that charge. The Athletic, is charging for fantasy advice. ESPN Insider charges for fantasy advice. Could it get that big? Is there another revenue stream there? Absolutely there is. Like, that's the annoying thing. You're sitting on a new revenue stream, but your head's too far up your ass because you're going, oh, this might be hard, we can't do it. And then to say that people won't pay? Well, you know what? I love fantasy football. I did. And I mean, this is no disrespect to the guys that run it. I know how hard they worked in that program. but the UI wasn't exactly user-friendly. Build a user-friendly platform like Yahoo or ESPN or one of the other fan tracks, one of the other hundreds of fantasy sites out there. There's so many of them. You can't tell me somebody wouldn't do it. And it would bring you so many fans. You make it free. You jam it full of advertising. You have fantasy insight and articles. And you get rid of that stupid salary cap game that if you're spending a dime on it, you're wasting your money. It's frustrating. It's so obvious to me, Joel. Like, this is a hill I will die on.
I know it is for you. And I think in principle I agree. There's no question that, in theory, a properly run fantasy outlet could do wonders for the CFL.
Yes.
I have my concerns about how realistic that really is. Not because of the finances, not because of the lack of will or anything like that. I question just based on what the CFL is, and that's not popularity or anything like that. I just don't know, because the NFL works because you have 32 teams, you have like 16 games a week, you have 3,000 players. There's lots of inventory of games and players to make the you draft the player and that player is yours unless you trade him or release him.
Right.
And then you could have fairly big leagues to do that. I don't know with basically 4 games a week, 40 odd players per team, and really only picking offensive players. So you're really talking about like 22 players per team plus kickers over 4 teams. How big of a fantasy sort of system are you really building where you can actually build these really successful leagues that your friends want to be in? But I don't know. That's the only concern I have about it.
To me, and here's my counterpoint to that. I think one thing that's unique with the CFL is you always get that guy that comes out of nowhere every year or two, right? So you still have the opportunity.
So you had a handful of players that you still really don't have a big base to work on, and it comes to your top, whoever picks the first few guys, are likely to be the best players, and they might just win.
Right, but on the same note, I think with the ability, with CFL, it's so notorious for guys having breakout seasons that you never heard of. Who knew who Shaq Evans was 3 years ago? Right? Like, it seems like every team's got 2 or 3 of those guys that bust out and really be something. And I just think, like, any kind of league you and your buddies can be in and grow that camaraderie. And I even think the fact that you have a smaller player pool, could you do a 12-team dynasty league? No, absolutely not. You're right. Could you do an 8-team league?
So basically everyone gets one team in the league, essentially. That's basically all that, and that's all it comes down to. And You'd have to limit the roster size in some way. It would have to be much different than what we know fantasy football to be right now.
Right, but even every league I've ever been in has you can't have more than 2 quarterbacks on your team, right? Like every league I've been in has player limits, things like that, right?
But I mean overall roster size, because the pool and the number of games per week, I mean you could go down a bunch in the first day or game or 2, and then your week's already over. There's no real chance for a comeback as often, really.
No, but I mean, you weight your point values. I mean, to me, you go quarterback, 2 wideouts, a running back, a flex position, because we don't have tight ends, specialty, a defense, and a kicker. I mean, it's not a lot, but I still think it would garner far more interest than what the league is doing with this totally unique salary cap platform that they've built. I
don't disagree with that part. I don't know if to that, sort of that smaller level is really going to, ramp up the interest that every, Tom, Dick, and Harry is wanting to do CFL fantasy.
Right, but on the same note, and you said it, even if you pick, if you pick a couple guys that are studs and your buddy that knows nothing about football that just goes off the draft rankings, and next thing you know, he wins, that guy's going to be interested in football, right? I'm not saying it's the magic elixir that'll fix all things, but to me, it's the most glaringly obvious thing you could do to bring in, even if you don't bring in new fans, I think you'd have a lot more buzz about the league, and I think you'd get, those guys that sit there and, oh yeah, I only watch 4-down football, I only watch this. I think you'd get a guy or two of that, like around your workplace. He's taking part, and honestly, I could see like Americans playing it. You put it on ESPN, even as all jokes aside, I bet you would get Americans and playing CFL fantasy football. I think you would.
I don't think you would. Not in any sort of significant numbers.
No, not in significant numbers, but I think you'd see a little bit. And that's how the league needs to start doing something. And to me, it's an obvious something small that you could do to move forward, because everything they're doing is not working.
No, I agree that they need to provide better fantasy options for fans. I don't know if it's going to lead to the outcomes some people think it do. That's all.
I mean, you're not going to sell out every game all of a sudden, but I think you'll start. I think it's an easy, simple, it's like the house is already built. You just got to, finish it, drywall it. Yeah, that work can be expensive. That work can be hard, but it's harder to sell the house without it, right? So I think you'd bring people in, and it's easy. I mean, you obviously have some sort of stat accumulating platform with CFL players on it for the stupid this stupid salary cap football. I don't understand, and I'm no IT guy. I don't understand how you can't just, flip the switch and all of a sudden everybody's on a roster, right? I'm sure you can't. I'm not suggesting it's simple, but again, you have the house half built. Just finish the fucking house.
I mean, another way, of course, to garner more interest in the house is to make the product more interesting and exciting.
Right.
With different colors and, fun stuff and things that people want to look at. And, I think it's safe to say in 2021, the CFL product wasn't great on the field.
No.
And I know some people think it's, kind of been of a one-off, but I think it's kind of been a slow downward turn. And then, of course, the year off sort of amplified everything. We've talked about this a lot on this program over the course of the last, 3 years or so. And, four downs aside, I think there are, this doesn't mean we're against change. Of course not. I think there are things that the league could do in order to, sort of jumpstart the product a little bit without greatly changing, sort of the fundamentals of Canadian football. Right. And there's all kinds of discussions out there. And I think one that I hadn't even thought of until it came up in Randy's road trip, which I thought was really smart, is just moving the hash marks.
Yeah.
And this is a conversation that apparently has been going on around the league. And I think it's great because right now, that wide side throw in the CFL is just absolutely ridiculous. It's certainly, when if you move the hash marks to the width of the goalpost, the wide side is still going to be the wide side. I mean, it exists in the NFL as well. But if you line up sort of the same from there, it won't be as difficult for anyone in the CFL to make that throw because, no offense to the guys here, most of the quarterbacks in the CFL don't have the arms that the NFL quarterbacks do. No. Otherwise, they'd be in the NFL.
No, sir, and you're not wrong. The other idea that I liked of yours, and I say this as a fan of kickers, is how you suggested moving the goalposts back.
Yeah, and I have to give a little bit of credit to some other people for this one. I know Phil and John Dan Plaster has been kind of in favor of this for a while, and I've also had discussions about this with the Green Zone's Daryl Davis from time to time.
Right, yep.
He's very much a proponent too, more so for safety than anything else, because, and to me, I know there's a bunch of different ways you can look at it. There's a bunch of different ways this could go, but ultimately, I mean, I think number one, there is a bit of a safety factor there. Number two, just make it harder to kick field goals.
Right.
Let's encourage more touchdowns versus field goals, where it's like, okay, I'm at the 40, I can't kick a field goal here, but there's no point in punting. And then if a coach does punt, well, we can ridicule them forever.
It's true. I mean, we will make sure to just crucify them with now voice of the Bombers, Derek Taylor, to point that out. So, actually, after you publish your article, believe it or not, people actually read and listen to what we do sometimes. My buddy Todd, he texted me and said, "Okay, you move the goalpost back." But he specifically wanted me to ask you, and I apologize. I should have given you the heads up before we started recording. I was going to hit you with this, but what do you do? What do you do with the Rouge in that situation?
Well, I think it almost makes the Rouge. I would change it how I thought it should always be changed when it comes to field goals.
Yeah.
Where if you miss and it goes straight out, you get nothing.
Yeah.
But if you concede it in the end zone, it's one.
I agree.
Because to me, that's always how it should have been with field goals.
Yeah.
I think the Rouge is something, for the most part, you should have to concede, not just be given. The other team should have to concede the Rouge to you. You shouldn't just earn it automatically.
Yes. No, and I agree with you 110%. And my argument to what I had said to Todd, too, was I think, if anything, that deep end zone, I think you could see some potentially crazy returns.
Yeah, if you're down one, you're down two late, and you're going to try, a 50-yard field goal from whatever the yardage ends up being at that point,
Yeah.
and you miss, you come up short, well, okay, you're in the middle of a 20-yard end zone now, and the guy's probably got a lot of room to run.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of room to run, a lot of place for blocks to be missed, and no, I like that idea. I've never been a fan of the goalposts where they are. Ironically, with my position as a Blue Bombers fan, how that has certainly helped us out lately.
We know of at least one quarterback in this league that would appreciate the goalpost being moved back, and probably one former CFL kicker of the same franchise.
yes, I would agree on both fronts on that. So I would say that would be a. I would say that I would like that move. I don't think it's too legit.
And I think, I like the bigger end zones
compared
to the NFL. I think
100%.
the NFL, but it wouldn't be the worst if they shrunk them to 15. For being completely honest,
right?
Not because out of some sort of changing of the game or anything like that. It's still bigger than the NFL. I think it's more than enough room to still try and score touchdowns. Maybe helps with the field goals a little bit there if you move in the back. But I mean, the end zones aren't all symmetrical. They're all the same size across the league as they currently are. If you shrunk them all to 15, everyone can fit them in. BMO and I think in Montreal and Edmonton are kind of cornered weird, and then you wouldn't have that problem anymore if you just went to 15.
No, although I kind of like the uniqueness of that. Like, I love baseball. Like, I know. The uniqueness of the different like.
The Montreal one isn't too bad though. The Toronto end zones are bad.
The Toronto end zones are bad and multi-surface.
Yeah.
You're right. Like, I like things like that make a venue unique. So I agree with you in principle, but me as a nerd, and this is strictly a nerd thing, I'd be against that only again because I like that. Same as no two MLB parks are the same. Like, I'm a pretty big fan of that setup. So. Well,
and I even with the hash marks moving, I know of at least one franchise, and I believe Brian Valentine has told me two, that may not enjoy changing of the field dimensions because their lines are stitched into the turf stupidly.
Yes, so that will never happen because it will cost people that make them a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Calgary, to their defense, their stadium's old. That turf is probably old. It's been that way forever, whatever. The Riders had a chance to do something smart and not stitch in at least the lines, the logos, whatever, but they could have at least just not stitched in the lines, and it would have been a much better service for a number of reasons, but oh well, they made their choice.
They also made their choice not to put a roof on it in Saskatchewan, but
I'm okay with that still. I'll die on that hill.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm very much a proponent of outdoor football.
Oh, certainly. I'm not even so much talking for football itself. I just think the amount of things that you could do with that space, all year round, considering it's a publicly owned space, if there was some sort of shelter on it, right? Like,
nothing rolls through in the winter. I think the ice feels fine.
Well, yeah, now that they've done the ice field, that's right. And I want to see that curling game return because that, I know we've talked about that before. That was bonkers, and I loved it.
Yeah. Some other things. I think sort of the other sort of two things that I brought up that I think the CFL could do. Mm-hmm. And this one we've talked about a lot in this podcast is, of course, the play clock. I know there's a lot of people say, "Oh, the 20-second play clock, it's great. It's the CFL." It's like, well, it's a 20-second play. It's a 20-second play clock from when they whistle it in, which sometimes is taking upwards of a minute to happen. So the pace is not better than in the United States because of that, because the offenses don't get to run tempo. And we got to get the ball spotted faster. We got to get that clock moving faster. Running clock, I'd say, 20 seconds running clock is probably unrealistic. So if you moved it up to 30, 35 seconds, the game would keep moving, trust me. And the other thing, and it's sort of one that I know Rob Vanstone supports a little bit as well over at the Leader Post, essentially I would bump the ratio back up to 8 because I think we should be employing Canadians and it's a Canadian Football League and all that matters. But through that, you would have to have 4 players on each side of the ball. And that's not to say that, Canadians can't play defense. We know there are a number of Canadians who can play defense, and they're only getting better at the non-positions that aren't offensive line these days. But at the same time, most of these coaches still love to use, 11 Americans on defense if they can. So, and they're having success with it. That's not to knock Canadian defensive talent, but coaches should be forced to have a certain number of Canadians on defense on the field as well, just to sort of level the playing field between offensive defense in that regard.
I would agree with that take. I'm also a fan though of, to get players to stick around a little longer, that in certain circumstances, if a U.S. player spends X years with a team, and I'm with you. To me, you have to do both of these things at the same time. It's not one without the other. You bump up the ratio, exactly like you and Van Stone think, but on the
Barkley.
same. Right, and Barkley, yeah, Barkley agrees with the take. So now that the three of you all agree, you bump up the number of people you need on the field in terms of Canadians, but you allow, say, a maximum number of American players to be designated as Canadians after X amount of years with the same team. To me, that would go a long way, because that's another big thing is, unless you have a serious bro crush on somebody like Sergio, who do you get on your jerseys these days, right? Guy's gone in a year or two, unless he's a quarterback, right? So,
yeah, I'm just not sold on the idea. I don't know if I really agree with that one way or the other yet. It feels to me like, I don't know. I just can't quite put my finger on why I'm not entirely with it. Like, there's parts of it that I'm like, okay, yeah. Some days I agree with it. Other days I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on that one.
You see, that one, I think to grow the game,
like, if you did that to me, then you'd have to bump the ratio up to like 10 or something.
Right, exactly. I don't think there's a harm in that, right? And I think you cap the number of,
At least 8 of them would have to be like natural-born Canadians, whatever the hell the rule of that is.
Right, exactly. I some combination, but I think you bump the ratio up so you keep your Canadian content, and you say there's a maximum of 3 U.S. players that if they've been with you for at least 3 complete seasons, you can designate them as Canadians for the game, right? Like, I think that is one thing that the CFL does badly at, and this is one I don't even blame the CFL for. They don't really market their stars. It's a similar problem to what the NHL has. The NHL has no excuse. I mean, you got guys on 8-year, you got Connor McDavid on an 8-year contract, completely miserable. But I think the CFL, part of the problem is how do you promote your stars when there's a chance that they're someplace else a year later? Like, and a very good chance they're someplace else, a year or 2 later. So I think part of that, I don't even blame the CFL for it, but I think to me that would give you incentive to keep these guys around and give incentive for guys to stay around, because then, you could count you wouldn't have to worry about them. I even don't hate, and this is a crazy thought, I know this is one that would never happen to the CFL, but I don't hate it, is steal MLS's designated player rule. Where you can pay one guy as much as you want to come play for your team. I know it would never happen in the CFL, but
I could be mistaken, but wasn't that a thing at one point?
Well, yeah, when the Argonauts signed Rocket Ishmael for the year.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't
hate the idea. I don't hate the idea, no.
I don't know how many teams, I think it wouldn't become a fixture like it is from my very basic understanding of the 17th best pro soccer league in the world. But I think it's a cool concept. And even if you wanted to make your designated player, imagine what you could do if, okay, Bo Levi Mitchell is the designated player for the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah, I think I agree with it in principle. I think there would probably still be a cap on how much you could pay that player.
Right. Or what they, to me, it would be what they count against the cap. Like, your designated player counts $500,000 against your cap, but you can pay him as much as you want. Maybe then, let's face it. To me, if you really want to get eyeballs on the game, you give an option for really talented U.S. college kids to come here and play. There isn't a kid that's leaving the NCAA for $55,000 Canadian. You all of a sudden make it, hey son, exactly like Rocket Ishmael, you can either play for free in the NCAA or come here, play pro ball, and get paid $1 million in Canuck bucks, but still. I think there might be a guy or two. Like, that's, to me, you're not getting NFL stars to come here. But to me, that rule would open it up for a stud college player who's not draft eligible yet, or just wants to go, screw it. I'm like, I'm going to go to Canada. I'm going to make $1 million, and then I'm going to get drafted.
Well, I don't know if they'd be then draft eligible in the NFL.
Right. But then you can.
And I number one, football contracts aren't guaranteed, and I don't know if a kid straight out of college who's played American ball his whole life is going to come up here and make that. He's going to come up here and maybe he gets the money, but then he sucks and then he doesn't go to the NFL. So I think that's a big risk. And number two, name, image, and likeness in the NCAA, and this is kind of a far different path. I know a lot of our listeners probably don't understand.
Right.
A lot of those guys are getting that money now, and so I don't think any sort of money that you can offer them from the CFL, even that kind of money, because a lot of those guys are even getting kind of that money,
right,
through sponsorships and other things now, is going to draw them up here for that year when they could just do that, continue their NCAA career, and make sure they get drafted and then get paid millions of dollars just for being drafted. I don't think that's going to work with an NCAA player of any sort of value, quite frankly.
So maybe it's not the NCAA guy. Maybe again you start keeping your top end talent around for another year or two. Maybe instead of going to be a practice roster floater, Weston Dressler stays, because he only counts a maximum against the cap. Maybe, Brandon Zylstra stays. Maybe Duke Williams stays. Some of these guys that they go to the NFL with, all the hopes and dreams of being a star, maybe those guys stick around for another year or two and just dominate the league in a way that we really haven't seen and make themselves superstars up here. Like, this is one I've never thought of before until literally this episode, but like literally, I'm like, why the hell don't they do it? And I have no idea why Major League Soccer was in my head.
I think it works in MLS because it's like they have like a weird ownership structure where like every ownership owns a percentage of the league, which represents their team more so than they're just the owner of their team. Right. It's all the league's money anyway to begin with, essentially.
Right.
Which is maybe a model the CFL should also consider, which I believe a lot of people have talked about in the past too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's literally an idea that came to me tonight, and I think there's something there. I would have to think about it and articulate it, and I am good at neither of those things, but hey, it's fun to discuss.
On the topic of caps, I also think, and we've talked about this before, I think the coaching cap has been a detriment to the game.
Oh, it's got to go away. It's a terrible idea.
Like, coaching is more important in the game than ever. We joke about the number of coaches on rosters in American football, but I mean, it's making a difference. It's making everyone at their positions better. I can live with some sort of cap on how much, money there is in the pool, perhaps.
Right.
But I don't enjoy, the cap on the number of people in the pool. I think you should be able to have as many coaches you want even if it's under X amount of dollars, you figure out how to make it work, whatever. That's your prerogative if you want to hire 20 coaches while some other team has 15, because you want to make your guys better. And there needs to be room for sort of the young, innovative coaches to enter in the league and grow up in the league.
Well, and the thing that blows me away too is that, the coaching cap, and you mentioned how bad it is for CFL teams. I'm literally, I know there's a lot of U Sports teams because, again, these U Sports guys, usually the head coach is paid and everybody else is a volunteer. I don't think you should volunteer if you're working in pro ball, but no, I think it says something that at your, set your highest level of amateur football in Canada, teams have massive staffs. Like, there's a reason for that, right? Like, I'm just looking 4, 8, 16. There are 19 coaches listed on the Husky football website.
Yeah.
Like to me, if you're doing that as you're coming up into the league, you should be able to do that in the league. And I'm of the take that if some teams can outspend other teams on coaching and to me, it's no different than it's teams outspending teams on facilities. They're always going to have an advantage and a financial incentive to do better so you can keep up with the Joneses, per se.
Yeah. In this case, probably quite literally.
Yeah.
Hey, Jacques Cartier, show's over.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.